Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the brief online talk show called Finding Hope in the Pandemic, where we will be talking about an important but not widely covered topic on suicide cases and the suicide prevention efforts during this pandemic. We would also like to let you know that if you feel uncomfortable or affected in any way with the topic that will be shared today, we want to encourage you to reach out. There will be some hotlines that you can call here on the screen. You should be able to see it now, and if it's you maybe you can take a photo in case you can't remember the numbers later. But it's on your screen right now. We hope that everyone watching today will be safe and encouraged with what will be shared in the show in a bit. We want to thank and welcome all of you to this Chup.tv production. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Chup.tv is a local Malaysian youth channel which produces original and responsible content mainly for community development and nation building, especially amongst the youth. Today's talk show is presented to you in partnership with Linettes. Linettes, or in full, Life Inspired Network Society, is a network of individuals and institutions with a heartbeat to inspire life, specifically focused on suicide prevention. Now, before we begin, we'd like to let you know that during this talk show, we are also running a little giveaway where you, our audience, would stand a chance to win one of three prizes. What you need to do is to log on to this link that should be shown on your screen right now. There should also be a QR code. Just log on, scan it, and answer the quiz given and submit it before 11:30 a.m. today. The winner and prizes will be announced at the end of today's session. So keep watching and don't miss out. I also need to mention that this competition is not eligible for the staff and family members of our organization, namely Lynette, Chup.tv, Flatfish Media, and Asian Youth Ambassadors. So I'm so sorry, teammates, but this competition or contest is open to everyone else. So remember to scan the link or go to the link or scan the QR code and answer the quizzes. All right. Okay. We also have a Q&A session at the end of the talk show if time permits. So if you want to ask a question, again, scan the QR code or go to the link and drop in your questions there. You can remain anonymous if you want to. And so there you go. Now, if you've gotten all of that, without further ado, I'd like to launch the talk show now and pass the time over to our host, Mr. Kenneth Chin.
Thank you, Andy. Yo. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Breathe Online talk show. We're so glad that you could tune in and join us this morning on a very important topic that is also very recent, and we are all wanting to do something about it, I'm sure, and people are even praying about this and asking for divine help. And today we have two very distinguished guests with us, and we want to introduce them to you in a bit. But Breathe really is a program that seeks to, as it says, breathe, help people breathe a little bit easier with knowledge of how to find help, how to help others, that we might all just have a little bit of a relief, even in this very, very challenging times that we're living in. So let me take this opportunity now to welcome to this show our dear guests who are very, very busy people, but they have taken time off so generously and graciously to be part of this 1 hour together with us. Firstly, let me just welcome YB Puan Michelle Ng, and she is, the State Assemblywoman of Subang Jaya. That's where we have our office. And she was elected to office at the young age of 28. She's no longer 28. She's married, she's happy, and she's very, very active where she's at, doing really, really good things for Subang Jaya, which I'm so glad she is. And she's also the youngest assemblyman in Selangor. So congratulations to you, YB Michelle. We're so proud of you. She is also a huge advocate, a strong advocate for mental health. She's currently the advisor of Care Warrior. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Care Warrior focus on empowering communities with knowledge and tools regarding mental health. Care Warrior, don't forget that name. We will revisit that towards the latter part of this show. And of course, we want to welcome Dr. Ng Yin Ping. Both of you are Ngs. but not related, I'm sure. Are you related in some way? Maybe there's a secret you got to tell us. But our second guest is Dr. Ng Yin Ping. She's from Penang. A lot of us will call Penang our favorite place for food, especially. She is currently the consultant psychiatrist at Pantai Hospital Penang, with a special interest in suicide prevention, ADHD, and psychotherapy. She's the vice chair of iLife. Have you ever heard of iLife? Maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about that later. iLife Suicide Prevention Association of Penang. And she's committee member of the Home Mental Health Association. I like the word the Home, sounds very cool. And Penang Association of Counseling and Psychology, Mental Health Association of Penang. So very, very distinguished, very, very experienced guests that we have. And I want to, again, thank them both for being here with us. Now, let's just get straight into it, if you don't mind. YB and Dr. Ng. Okay, let's get down to some sad news first. Okay, let's start with some stark stats. All right, we know that it's just been on the increase, the up and up, not just the COVID-19 numbers, but sadly also the suicide and suicide attempt numbers. Okay, now we would say this, right, Dr. Ng and YB, Michelle, we would say that even one is too many, right? I'm sure we all nod our heads. Even one is too many. But in 2019, we have 609 recorded suicide cases. In 2020, it went up to 631 reported suicide cases. And then it says here in the report I'm reading that just in the first 3 months of 2021, the first 3 months, we already have more than half the number of the total in 2020, and that is 336. Of course, now, scarily, the numbers must have gone up, but more than half just in the first 3 months. We have women, being the gender that this has affected more than men. Now, I know that in times past, I've interviewed other people, like even the police, and they said, maybe about 3, 4, or 5 years ago, it was men. But recent times, the stats show that it's 5-to-1 ratio, women. It's really, really very sad. I'm married. I have a wife. I love my wife. I love the women in my organization. I respect them. And when I hear women, it could be our moms, it could be our sisters, it could be our wives. These are very precious people. 5-to-1 is a very, very high ratio. And this one really drives home. The next point, it really, really breaks my heart. The majority, says the report, is that young people are most affected. The majority of these cases, let me read here, is between 15 to 18 years old. Majority, 15 to 18 years old, followed by the next age group, 18 to 40. Wow, that's young. And I work among young people. This program today is in partnership with Lynette's. And Lynette's, of course, is an organization that reaches out to people with suicide tendencies and helping with mental health. And AYA. AYA is Asian Youth Ambassadors, working with young people now for 26 years. Our hearts, bleed when we hear that young people are now most affected. I can go on and on. One more thing from these stats that really just blew my mind was, so many calls are coming in, right, to the different talian, the different connections and call centers, and they are into the 5 figures, and befrienders, are telling us their stats. And from what I read, about 10% of these calls that are coming in, 10% are young people at the age of 13 years old. 13 years old, 10% of the callers, and they are already thinking of suicide and thought about attempting suicide. Now, for the last 5 minutes, I just had to lay it out there for our hearers and for our viewers that we are facing a real enemy. And this is, I'm not talking about world stats, I'm talking about Malaysia's stats, and all of you know it. Of course, Dr. Ng, you know it. Probably you know more stats than I do, and I'm sure you do. And YB Michelle, you are on the ground. and I'm going to ask you later about what you do and why it works. But can you please, Dr. Ng and YB Michelle, tell us what's going on? What's going on? Why these numbers? Besides the pandemic, of course, but what's going on? Maybe I start with you, YB Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, Kenneth. So I think it's a combination of many factors. The pandemic definitely is an exacerbator, simply because of what we have to do to stay safe, which takes away a lot of the social aspects, which allows us to function as humans, which means your interaction with people, which can be coping mechanisms, your the physical contact that you need, to have that level of comfort. We also hear from psychiatrists and clinical psychologists that their patients are deteriorating rapidly because there is this problem of connecting with them and diagnosing and getting them through their illness. So when you have all these combined, you see what we see today. And on top of that, now with COVID, we are telling people to stay home. And while that keeps us safe from COVID, there are a lot of other things as well that people will have to adapt to at home. So if you talk about women, for example, they, if they're working, have to work from home, and on top of that, have to care for their children who now have to study online, right? And on top of that, still cope with the needs of the home. So you still have to cook, you still have to clean, and that is a lot of pressure,
Yes.
right? How do you focus on all of that? And I'm also thinking of the women who are living with their captors and facing domestic violence more frequently, simply because they are stuck at home. So I'm wondering whether, and there's very little study that can be done about this now, simply because those who can do studies also do have to stay at home. But I'm wondering whether all these factors culminated together uh, bring us to where we are today. My heart goes out, especially to those who are facing this for the first time. And you definitely would see an increase in this group of people who suddenly realize that, oh no, I'm facing anxiety, or no, I'm facing depression. I've never faced this before. What do I do? Um, and with access to help now so severely limited because movement is limited, this group of people
Yeah.
suddenly gets left out because they never have found a need to seek for help. Before this, they were
Yes.
coping okay. So what do we do now with this group of people? How do we reach out to them? Are the questions that we try to answer. Yeah, so those are my thoughts.
Well, thank you, YB Michelle, and to you, Dr. Ng. Why? What's really going on?
Thanks, Pastor Kenneth. Well, first of all, before I say anything, I would like to first recognize all the people out there who are living with some form of lived experience of mental health. I just want to tell you that you are not alone. I think definitely the adjustments needed with the arrival of the pandemic, because it's literally involving a major upheaval of all our lifestyles, actually, literally, in terms of how you work, how you study, and how you actually just do your day-to-day life, right? And that's also infiltrated through the media as well. So I think definitely in terms of sudden, well, initially it was sudden, now it's sustained, right? Changes like this. Generally, people would take time to adjust. So possibly, I think initially it was about, okay, this is something that's temporary, and we'll be able to deal with this. And then we are now into the second year, and I think I don't have to say what it's like at the moment. So I guess in that sense, sometimes after the initial how would you say, and kind of the realization, I guess, of what has happened, and then when you see that, well, it's not really kind of letting up in a sense, then I think for this year it's slightly different, that you see another, I suppose, in a sense, sometimes some people can feel some level of despair, right? And I also agree with YP Michelle in the sense that I think initially people were already trying to cope with whatever ways that they can. But I think with the arrival of the pandemic, then what happens is our usual coping mechanisms that have helped us, just things that we may have taken for granted, just going out, hanging out, saying hi, just being around at work, or even, the routine, I think, of just being able to go out to work and come back. So that means that we can kind of compartmentalize our sort of home life and then work life. So whatever stresses that are related to those situations, we can kind of have a break in a sense. However, when we are asked to stay at home, everything kind of merges. And especially if you don't have that luxury of your own private space, for example, and you have to share that space, then it becomes a problem. I think in terms of perhaps young people and parents and their families, I guess if I think, with the onset of digital media, we are really facing, we are really living, I think, our kids, right, who are born into really digital life. We're not used to sitting at home and waiting in queue and things like that. So I guess when initially there was, I suppose, a certain sort of hooray, you don't have to go to school. But then I think that sort of gradually was replaced with the realization that, too much of being away from your school and meeting people and just having the presence of someone there when you're learning isn't great at all, right? And I think parents as well, they get antsy about, okay, what's my child doing in the room so long? I often had to manage questions from parents like, is it healthy for my child to be in the room by themselves? And I guess there's a pros and cons. It depends on what they're doing. It depends on whether they're also speaking with you on what's going on with their lives, and it's also whether are they connected with people that are safe, I guess, because they're not, with the digital world, they're not really isolated in the sense they do have friends, so they're not exactly being in the room by themselves. But then again, I think sometimes the stress, the added stress already to the difficulty in studying and all that, is when you have that misunderstanding. If you are cooped up in your room by yourself and you're not talking to us, then it becomes an increased stress. However, then there is the stress of, I've been talking to my friends all this while, and then I suddenly had to sit outside, and that gives rise to a lot of arguments, right? And I think the compounding factor, what YB Michelle had said earlier on, is also that I think our existing systems, I think if the pandemic wasn't there, we were already gradually trying to improve efforts in suicide prevention. However, I think with the pandemic coming in, that forces, I think that displaces a lot of attention elsewhere towards the actual handling of the pandemic, and that limits, that forces us to change certain things that we do. So, and the one thing that hasn't changed, or we are hoping to change, is the existence of the stigma. Sometimes it's not about not knowing or not having awareness related to suicide and its prevention. I think a lot of people, especially we talk about young people, parents, they always, a lot of them would have, that can't be happening, my child is too young, and that doesn't happen. So then they said, maybe they're just seeking attention, that kind of thing. So that is that stigma and that fear, I guess, in terms of dealing with the possibility of having mental health in your family, it's a huge problem.
Right. Thank you. Before I go on, I just want to apologize if you hear any buzzing sound, any drilling sound. This is what you have, the hazard of doing things like this from home. My neighbor decided to do renovations this morning. So excuse the drilling. It's not in my house, it's my neighbor. And, the Bible tells us to love our neighbor. So, excuse me. Let me get back into this. So I want to help our audience to at least have some understanding of this whole suicide thought process, how it comes about, how it develops, and I hear the word stress. So I was about to ask, is it then all about stress? But then I also hear about coping mechanism. So if I was sitting in front of somebody and I was going through, like, why suddenly you're thinking about it? You never thought about it for the last 20 years or 15 years or 35 years. How come suddenly? Is it because of a highlighted talk and just more news about suicide that you suddenly think that is the latest fad? Of course, we don't want to say that because it's not right. But some people might think like that, or it's a ridiculous thing, stigma. But I think there is some sort of if I were to write it down on a piece of paper, Dr. Ng and YB Michelle, from your experience, where does it start? Does it start just by a change in your environment, then moving on to stress, and then moving on to, because most of us are stressed in some way or the other, but then maybe it's the coping mechanism. So some can cope with the stress, some cannot, and so as you're going through a list, if there's such a thing as a list, so that people hearing can also watch out for what is happening with their loved ones or even themselves. They can say, oh, I'm going through stress, but what's after stress? Coping. What's after coping? This. If you can go through just a simple list with us, if there's such a thing, and then as you're dealing with that list, can you also help deal with how, therefore, we should respond so that we don't have to go further down the list? Could I go back to you, YB Michelle?
Okay. This is a tricky question, and with caution, because I need to say that I'm not an expert. So for the technicalities, I would have to defer to Dr. Ng. But there were a few things that were mentioned in your question there that I'd just like to deal with. So we do run a suicide prevention program, which we'll talk a bit more about later. But part of that 3-hour course is dealing with what we do now know about suicide. And I have these conversations very frequently with my residents, community leaders, whoever it is that knows that I work with people on suicide prevention. They like to have conversations like this with me, on one hand, challenge, some just want to pick my brain. And a perception that I come across quite frequently is that some people suddenly wake up one day and they want to kill themselves. I don't think that happens. I think what we need to understand is that as humans, we are naturally survivors. Yes. We will fight, right?
Yes.
For many of us who are watching this video, even as we are talking about suicide, I don't think it naturally occurs to us just by hearing the word suicide that we want to take our own lives now.
Right.
I don't think talking about suicide in itself would cause someone to commit suicide. To my mind, and again, I have to defer to Dr. Ng, it's a combination of a lot of things that would cause someone to come to that point. That said, very common misunderstanding about suicide is that there are no signs. There are usually signs if we keep our eyes peeled and keep our ears open, whether it is what we call indirect or direct behavioral cues, or direct and indirect verbal cues. So there are some things that will be hinted or said directly by the person affected, which if you can pick up on it, should ring alarm bells in your head for you to ask them the proper questions of whether they need help or what kind of support do they need, and just come around them and provide them that kind of support. Right. I think unfortunately, many of us don't know that those are signs. Whether it is because of our upbringing or culture, we tend to set that aside and say that, you're just seeking for attention, or, we all face this, so you should be able to get through it anyway.
Right.
Or it may be an issue of upbringing as well, where a number of us are brought up in a very protected environment, and where you are suddenly exposed to large amount of stress, you find yourself unable to cope. So we take for granted that our upbringing and someone else's upbringing might be different. We might be brought up in harsher environment, but then we don't realize how that has contributed to our ability to cope, our ability to build that level of resilience. Someone else might not have had that kind of experience, and as a result, those muscles are not practiced, those muscles are not developed. So those are a few things that I just want to deal with in that question as to, how is it that someone who is well then reaches that point of suicide. I think it's best for me to defer to Dr. Ng.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was very helpful, Michelle. Thank you. Dr. Ng?
Yeah, I agree with what YB Michelle has said. Generally, in terms of suicide prevention, you're really looking at what are the risk factors that are really there? What I would emphasize on is that suicide's just not caused by one factor. Although sometimes we look at it in the past, we've seen that some media portals kind of say that okay, this person died by suicide because of whatever cause, and it's usually a single cause that's been identified. That is actually quite misleading actually, because suicides don't just happen because of one cause. It's happens usually because of a cumulative complexly interacting number of factors. For example, if you are looking at the individual, the person may have had, I think the most important risk factor would be if the one person has had a past history of self-harm or suicide. That is one major and most important risk factor.
Right.
And if the person is already having to deal with mental health problems or has a family history of suicide, for example, or also dealing with a lot of what we call psychosocial problems like financial problems, and right now in the pandemic, dealing with isolation, and then having interpersonal relationship issues, right? So those things in one individual alone, and that particular individual could be also living in a place where they are perhaps marginalized. Say, for example, we talk about refugees, we talk about foreigners who are not actually able to return to their respective hometowns because of the current situation, and they could also be living in a climate where people are highly stigmatized to mental health problems. So all these factors in combination, and also importantly, I think what has been highlighted in the past few months is the effect of unsafe suicide-related content on the media. Okay,
Right.
so if there were things talking about very pejorative or very stigmatizing tones or very judgmental tones about
Right.
people who have tried to harm themselves or tried to end their lives by suicide, and then they have to be subjected to being charged under the Section 309, for example, those aren't going to help. So it's kind of not really telling them that it's okay to seek help. And obviously, in the current pandemic situation, it's also more difficult to seek help, especially if you don't have the funding or finances. It makes it more difficult. So these are, you can see just in one case alone, how many in the individual factors and the compounding factors in terms of society and in terms of even the health system in a particular country like ours. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying if things are more difficult for the particular individual, then it's all part of the factor. So then you are looking at also the person's not only their own coping skills, but what are the support systems that they have.
Right.
So you have all these things in the background, and then you have the current surrounding things that they're facing. And YP Michelle is right in the sense that sometimes people say, oh, you don't you don't see any difference, and they just woke up and they were suddenly they had this suicide, they tried to end their life, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on two things, I guess. How well you know the person, right? So how well the person trusted you to actually tell you or try to indicate to you, perhaps not directly, but indicate to you that they were actually, having some difficulties. They're actually contemplating suicidal behavior, for one thing. And on the other hand, is also in the person themselves. I guess if I were a person and I was facing a lot of distress, okay, and I feel that I don't want to go and burden other people. I don't think my family would be able to accept it if, I suddenly told them that I'm facing suicide, I'm having suicidal thoughts. And I think that if I revealed it to anyone outside, that it would impact my
Right.
kind of family's
Sure.
name. For example, if I'm someone that's kind of prominent, then I might make all the effort to kind of appear. I might put on a facade actually to appear okay outside when I'm actually battling with a lot of things. But then again, we can't. Most of us can't put up this thing 24/7. So I guess somewhere along the line, someone with us may actually see that there are times where we're not so okay. So I guess sometimes whether it's obvious sign or subtle signs, it's up to the person surrounding person who is having distress, mental health distress at that point of time, to kind of try to just reach out and ask, and that would make a lot of difference just by someone just virtually
good.
asking. Yeah. So in the whole, when you're talking about risk and how it happens, you're right in the sense that it's about stress, and it's about coping. So even for a person, whether you have mental disorder or not, that is not, you don't have to have a mental disorder before you have suicidal behavior. Some people don't have mental disorders and they have suicidal behavior. It's at that point of time, the accumulation of stressors and the surroundings around you, it's always that balance. So obviously it doesn't happen overnight. So yeah. I
Right.
hope that
It's
answers
just
questions.
too much happening at one time, right?
Yeah, I think it's more than one person can cope at that point of time. Yeah.
Actually, I think it's all about timing, really. I have a family background in this sad thing called suicide. And you're right. Both of you are right. It can be so many factors, but it's not just the factors, it's the factors coming together all at one go, all at one time. And so I have come to know this, that it's all about timing. Life itself is all about timing. In fact, the answer also is about timing. The hope coming at the right time, the encouraging words coming at the right time, the person coming into your life, and it's all about timing. It's not coming like last week, or it's not coming next week. It's coming at the right time. So the negative is that it can be so much pressure coming in that one time that you decide, I just want to do this. Or in the positive sense, it can be that friend coming to you at that right time. So again, we don't want to say this just to make anyone feel bad that they didn't say whatever they needed to say at the right time. No, but just I want the whole audience who's tuning in today to know that life really is about timing. And if you are coming under all kinds of pressure, sometimes you just need to sit down and breathe. And that's the name of this program, and begin to break down some of these things, because really the timing of things can either make you or break you. And so
Can I just
yeah, please go ahead,
interject?
Doctor.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's sometimes it's about timing, and at the same time, what I want to tell everyone outside there is, that even though yes, it is about timing for the particular individual. However, for us, in terms of reaching out to help out, every day, every
Correct.
time is the right time. You don't wait.
Yeah.
Every time is the right time. And in terms of if you are going through a hard time, I usually like to use this analogy. Imagine that you are just going through. You're in a tunnel. You're going through a dark tunnel, and you can't see.
Yeah.
You can't see anything, right? So think about it. There's just two ways. You can you can either plod on or hang on and emerge at the end of the tunnel. The tunnel will end at some point. So it's not a full stop. You're having a difficult time right now. It's not a full
Yes.
stop, and there is tomorrow, and
That's right.
it will end at some point of time. So I hope that people would look out for that, and
Yes.
know that you're not by yourself in this facing this thing.
Yeah, thank you for that. We are going to pause for just a moment and come back after this video message. Thank you.
Well, there are lots of things can be done for emotional regulations, for relaxations. My favorite skills is something called mindful stop. So mindful stop, it's just a very short procedure or protocol. It's a 4-step thing. So stop stand for S, stop whatever that you are doing. So just get yourself comfortable. And T for take 3 slow deep breath. Yeah, so just mindfully observe your breath and take 3 slow deep breath. Okay. And the O stand for observing 3 sounds from the surrounding. So quietly, just name the sound. So for example, I'm hearing the aircon sounds over here. I'm hearing my own voice of talking. I'm hearing some little sounds from outside. So just label these sounds, and P, finally proceed with a smile. Yeah, this mindful stop is, it acts like, in our computer, sometimes it has going a little bit slow, then we clear memory, then we click on refresh. So this is a little exercise that helps to refresh our mind a little bit before we proceed to do the next things.
Welcome again to the Brief Online Talk Show. We have in our virtual studio 2 very distinguished guests. If you have just joined us, we have YB Michelle Ng, State Assembly Woman of Subang Jaya, and Dr. Ng Ying Ping, who is the consultant psychiatrist at Pantai Hospital Penang. And we already have had at least a good 30 minutes of very, very beneficial, productive discussion on not only what brings about suicidal thoughts and how we could be able to manage it. And we talked towards the end about timing, that sometimes it's just all about timing. And then of course, Dr. Ng said every day is a good time to help somebody. And every day is a good time to breathe and say, I can go another day. I can go another day. So I thought that was very, very good advice. But now I'm going to ask them personally, starting with YB Michelle first, because I've heard about something called Care Warriors that she initiated together with a great team of volunteers there in Subang Jaya, where we are also situated, our organization. And YB, I've heard good things about it. I'm going to let you tell us what is it and how does it work, and why? Why do you think it's working so well, YB?
Yeah, just want to spend a bit of time to talk about how it came about. And it was like what you mentioned when I was voted in at 28. It was very overwhelming because, new job, never been an employer before, suddenly found myself in that situation, biggest constituency in the entire Selangor, trying to learn the ropes of things. And then suddenly, 2 weeks in before I've even taken my oath, I get a message saying that, Michelle, someone who has supported your campaign, their child has just passed away. And this came about because, he or she decided to take her own life. And these are the funeral details. Was wondering whether you might be willing to just pay them a visit. And that was the first funeral I attended as State Assemblywoman. And that left a mark on me because this person was so young, so young. And I thought to myself, wow, okay, this is what I have to try to solve. And how do you do that? And I felt very overwhelmed at that time because suddenly the weight of the responsibility came all at once. And I remember driving up to the funeral parlor, and I'm thinking to myself, what do you even say in this situation? Is there even any words that can offer any comfort to someone who has lost someone so dear? And when I arrived, I said hello to the parents, and all I could do was listen. And I remember listening, and a sentence that kept popping up was, I did my best, but I wish I knew how to do better, and I know that their parents did everything that they could within what they knew. But that also got me thinking, for the rest of us, is there anything that we can do individually in this whole big picture of mental health and suicide prevention. And so that began a journey of me searching for knowledge and information out there. And I realized that there are people around the world who are working on this matter. And then I started thinking about what we are doing in Malaysia and realized that this is a gap that we can begin to fill. And I just want to go back to a point that Dr. Ng mentioned, where she talked about trust. Someone who has revealed to someone that they trust that they are going through a difficult time and may have even indicated, whether directly or indirectly, that they are contemplating suicide. Now, I paired that with what I realized on the ground regarding, again, what Dr. Ng mentioned about stigma and many misconceptions around suicide prevention, and realized that there is such a need for us to fill in that knowledge gap and to empower those who are interested in making a difference in this area, to teach them what to do. Because I see that there are many who want to know what to do but don't know what to do. Now, going back to that point about trust, you can set up hotlines and that's good. But then there will be a number of people who will only reveal it to those that they trust.
Yeah.
But how do I know who are these people? Who are these people that, those who are struggling with mental health trust? I don't know who they are. But what I do have, and this is in any community, is a community structure. And this is something that is unique to Malaysia, where, historically we come together culturally, and then you have your ketua kampungs, you have your religious leaders, whether it's in churches or temples or masjids. And then now in urban settings, you have your residents association and rukun tetangga. So there is a community structure which they themselves are able to reach out to their own community. So they know who lives in, for example, USJ3. They know who lives in USJ1. They know who lives in this set of flats. And these people living in those areas know who these leaders are. So then I thought, okay, is there a way to get that information within that structure and rely on what we call the trickle-down effect, so that if someone has revealed to me and they trust me that they are contemplating suicide, if I don't have that knowledge, I know that someone who is living in my housing area, they are already equipped with that knowledge, and I can just ring them and say, hey, what do I do now? Right? Because these guys might not reach out to me. These guys might not reach out to the hotlines that we are putting out there. These guys might not even want to go to the hospital. But that person that they trust is the gap that we can then fill using this trickle-down effect. And so what we do is we get these leaders, community leaders, and we empower them with knowledge. We start breaking down misconceptions about suicide and mental health, and we tell them, okay, these are the indicators of someone who is struggling. And then we provide them with the language of how to come around them constructively, and then provide them the necessary support, and then empower them with another layer of information to say, okay, this is where you go, all right? Klinik Kesihatan, they are able to provide these resources. Hospitals, they are able to provide these resources.
Right.
This is what a psychologist does. This is what a clinical psychologist does. This is what a psychiatrist does, all right? So if you need help, these are your resources. Immediately bring them to seek help together, all right? And that is the idea, so that they don't feel alone, much as how they probably currently feel. And so that is how Care Warriors came about. To be honest with you, it just started off as a thing that we did, which was a program where, we organized online, gather a few people. We organized physically. That was before the pandemic. Gather a few people, have a talk, and that's it. Now, online, there are some challenges. But what we do see as well, Pastor Kenneth, is an increase in participation, perhaps because of what is happening in Malaysia. But I do think as well that it being online creates a level of accessibility for those who can't be with us physically. Now they can join us. And so, we decided that Care Warriors would be an appropriate platform, and we are in the business of empowering people with the necessary knowledge to deal with suicide, and we also do resilience training, but that's a topic for another day.
That's so good, YB Michelle. I wish that just many more state assemblymen around the country who are thinking like you're thinking and doing like you're doing. But of course, yours comes from a very, very touching personal story. Just 2 weeks into your office, and you already had to encounter that. And thank God that, I mean, a lot of us encounter it, but we might not do anything about it after that. But you decided to do that, and you've already got stories to tell. Do you know whether there's anything like that in other places? Any other state assemblymen like yourself doing that?
So a story that I can now share is it has been our heart that this be implemented. We wanted to use Subang Jaya as a model to say that, hey, this works, and to prove to the state government that, it does work.
Right.
So we have had some inroads, not as far as I would like yet, but we've had a meeting with the mental health task force headed by our health exco YB Dr. Siti Maria. She has heard from Mr. Pei Kai Xuan, which is the lecturer that we work with on suicide prevention, and he's excited about the possibility of implementing this statewide. With the MCO, things are going a bit slowly, but we've seen some progress there, and it heartens me to see that there is potential for this to gradually be implemented through perhaps a little bit of a different system in Selangor.
Yeah. I hope and pray together with you, YB Michelle, that exactly will be what will happen, and at a quicker pace, because we need it now, right?
Yeah.
It's all about timing again. Dr. Ng Yim Pin, I know that you are involved in so many things concerning, helping with suicide prevention and mental health, and I don't even know where to start, but maybe you can help us. Tell us, your probably most I don't know, proudest, maybe not the word that you like to use, but proudest project maybe that's out there that you are involved in, and what it is, and how does it work, and why do you think it's working?
Okay. Thank you, Pastor Kenneth. So I think, as you've heard earlier on, I work with a lot of NGOs. I'm most active in iLife Suicide Prevention Association of Penang. And what we do, I think that is, slightly different, is that in Penang, we work together with a lot of other NGOs. We have this mental health coalition of Penang where different NGOs doing different things. We communicate and we help share out each other's work, so it makes it easier, and we don't replicate what other people are doing in that sense. So in a nutshell, what we actually do is we educate. So there's a lot of raising awareness, training, and advocacy in terms of suicide prevention. We do gatekeeper training workshops. We run public talks, online resources. We also, in my own capacity, I also provide consultations in terms of efforts to decriminalize suicide attempts, or also to NGO volunteers for handling crisis situations. We help in terms of planning interventions within the NGOs, so what to do in terms of their activities, for example, helplines, SOPs, and also I'm also involved in research with the Suicide Prevention Research Malaysia, Suprema, in UKM, led by Prof. Chan Lai Fong, who is the International Association of Suicide Prevention
Right.
representative from Malaysia. Back to answering your question right now. The one project that I'm actually very passionate about, at least since last year and this year, actually started since 2019. YB Michelle has a story, her own personal story of what inspired her. For myself, I think it was my encounter with a client of mine who unfortunately died by suicide. And after that, as part of postvention, I met with her family members, all right? And the family members then, I think part of their grief was made even more complicated in a negative way, okay? In terms of the media coverage of the death,
Right.
which again, I think reminded in a bad way of their grief. So I think that even myself, I mean, I prefer not to see any media coverage at that point of time. But of course, invariably, you're in groups and some things get sent to you, And even though, you know, I am not a family member as a treatment provider, I found myself feeling quite low, I would say, quite low for the
Sure.
next few weeks. And I
Yeah.
think in that sense, you know, it actually made me even more aware of, you know, what is the impact if you have very unsafe, I guess, to a certain extent, inappropriate media content about suicide. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that we cannot or should not report or write anything about suicide-related content in the media. What I'm saying is, so please do, because I think it's a double-edged sword in the sense that you can write, and in your capacity as a content creator, what you can do, the words that you use and how the angle that you put in, you can actually really communicate hope, and you can communicate you know, how the information and resources, how do you seek help, how do you help someone, rather than focusing just on the statistics, rather than just focusing on how alarming it is. Because I believe that there's already so much negative news out there in terms of the pandemic. We see negative news every day, and honestly, whatever you read, whatever you view, it's going to go into your brain,
Yeah.
and you can't remove that once you've seen it, you know. And we don't really have a choice of how it affects us. So that is the thing. So in terms of, I guess, as an aside, what I would say is, if you don't need to see it, and if it's of no benefit to yourself or anyone else, don't share, disseminate, or read any form of negative news.
Right. Good
Right. So
advice.
that is one way. So in that sense, what we've been doing in iLife is we have been doing a lot of advocacy in terms of safe messaging. So safe messaging is, how do you communicate suicide-related content that is accurate and that emphasizes on conveying hope, recovery, encouraging help seeking. So what we have, our major project for this year was, I think it started in 2019 in itself, where we had a media workshop. Okay, media workshop in English. That was in KL. Later on, we followed up by a Mandarin version. That was a face-to-face still. We invited Prof. Emily Cheng from Hong Kong to, I think, share her insights in terms of to media practitioners in a workshop in Penang. That was also funded by the Penang State. And in terms of how do you communicate and how do you report suicide-related news safely. And I think that I would like to say that you can see the fruits of it happening more so this year, even though, you know, with the pandemic that's going on. What happened is, with one of the participants of our research, we had research on media as well, who is actually a media person. She actually kind of started off this whole initiative in terms of getting media practitioners to talk about suicide prevention, to talk about mental health in a very safe manner. That is recently started, called My Media Cares. So that was a good initiative by Shulin. All right. And with that, actually, just not too long ago in July, we managed to, with iLife and My Media Cares, we managed to organize a media workshop that's in Mandarin, also with Prof. Emily Cheng from Hong Kong, and that saw about 270 plus media practitioners on the whole of Malaysia.
Wow.
So I guess in terms of the pandemic, that is its silver lining, that, you know, instead of just localized to Penang, we have kind of a nationwide participation.
Right.
And I was really stoked by the whole thing, because this is, I would say, not mental health practitioner initiated, but it's media initiated. It's like, wow, striking gold in that sense. So yeah, so really kudos to the current change. And I think you can see also in the recently, you know, there is more change in terms of how people are talking about suicide prevention. I'm very allergic to like just suicide there on top of the headline. I said, you want to follow that up by prevention, and you want to really talk about, whatever you report, you want to ask yourself, well, how does this help your reader that's reading it? How is it helping them, have a better life? How is that helping them save other people? Yeah. So that is what's ongoing with us right now.
So good. All of us are doing something with regards to something that matters. And we all know that media is so powerful, right? And we should have media on our side as our biggest partner in suicide prevention. And I'm so thankful to hear that you have sown into that together with your team. And I'm sure YB Michelle also have had a hand in that. I've heard how she has also looked into how we can have more responsible media with regards to suicide prevention. So thank you to both of you. We have not much time left. Actually, officially, only 4 more minutes. So I wonder whether we can do 2 questions. We will, of course, attempt the first one. And to be fair, we will attempt the first one that came in. And so if you could answer it in 1 minute, great. If you can answer it in 2 minutes, great. We'll see where we go, whether we can do the second question or not. But here we go. The first question says, how would the speakers approach someone who denies, so this is a denial thing, having depression or suicidal thoughts, but appears to be? YB?
Yeah, I'll give you a tool that we teach our, in the course. And we try to, and this is very difficult. It takes people, a long time to hone the language.
Sure.
I think we have to be careful to not impose our views on how they feel. That's one. But what helps is sometimes, we can be too direct in our question, and that takes that person back quite a bit. But the language that we teach is, for example, if you want to query whether that person has suicide thoughts, we tell them to say this. When someone is facing the type of pressures that you are, they might think of suicide. Has that occurred in what you have faced so far? And what that does is you refer to someone else. And how someone else might have felt in that situation. So that takes the pressure off the question. And so that person doesn't feel confronted. And then allow that person that space to answer. And depending on what they answer, if they say yes, then you can follow up to say, would you be open for us, not for you, all right, for us to then walk through this together and seek help so that we'll be able to help you cope with this. And so there is that camaraderie that you built into that language. And that is what I mean by language is so important when it comes to managing a situation like this. Versus, are you thinking about suicide? If I am asked that question, I'm taken aback. I would say no, definitely not. And then if my follow-up to that, even though if I say yes, is then you need to go and seek help. I would say, what's going on, man? I came here to seek help from you. I trusted you, and suddenly I feel so alone. Counterintuitive to why I came to you in the first place. So that's what we try to do. But if that person says no, don't just leave it as that. I think there is a need to also say, look, you're obviously under a lot of pressure. I care for you. Anytime you need someone to talk to, please know that I am here. Ring me up immediately. I'll make that time for you. And that creates a world of a difference.
Sure. That's good. I would have even thought that it would be a presumption, isn't it? Or an assumption that we are making that the person is denying. How do you know that the person is denying? So we got to be also not too quick to judge. And with that language and the communication skills, we will find out more as we go down. But let's not be too quick to think that the person and make the assumption that the person is actually denying when the person may not be denying. And I think language, is important. Communication is important, and not to make the prejudgment so quickly. I think that's good language. Dr. Ng?
I completely agree with YB Michelle. What my take on it would be to first things first, we don't have to confront the person. Instead, as what she has said just now, we normalize it. I think what's important is the person has to feel safe with us. So the first thing first would you want to do is to validate the person's emotions. And what does that mean? Validate is actually to kind of convey to them that, you know, whatever you're feeling right now, it's it's reasonable and it's okay, because that is in line with how you are viewing the whole situation at that point of time. So their emotions are not wrong, and it's not strange at all. So I guess now that doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with what they're going to do about it. So they're two different things, right? And I guess sometimes, you know, when they say, for example, they outrightly say, no, I'm not depressed and I don't have suicidal thoughts. What I might actually say is that, depending on how close I am to them, I would say that, well, yeah, okay. I'm just concerned because for me, I'm feeling that there is something different about you recently. And that makes me a little bit worried.
Sure.
And you sure you're really okay? And then, you know, if you want to talk about it, I'm here. And then we carry on from there. So it's all about building that rapport and making the person feel comfortable. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, I think if they're not telling us and there's something else going on, I think we would gradually, going on from there, switch gears to see whether we can actually encourage someone to seek help. The one important thing is, I think if you are going one-to-one, this is something that often gets asked. What I would say is, you know, if a person that you're talking to, right, you feel that they're at a high risk of hurting themselves, or actually they're really quite suicidal and ending their life, I think at that point of time, that importance of saving someone's life and getting help for that actually supersedes the confidentiality.
Right. Sure.
All right. So that is what I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's how urgent it is, right? How real the situation is. Yeah, I think you're right. Now it's 3 minutes past 12. I would like to honor time, but also because there are at least another 2 or 3 more questions. So I'm going to respect my panel first to ask them the question. YB and Dr. Ng, is there a way you can stay on for another 15 minutes, or do you have something on to go? Okay.
No,
So
we just, yeah.
I'm okay.
you okay? Thank you. And maybe also our audience, maybe they only had about 1 hour, so I want to honor our audience. And maybe what I'll do is I'll pass it back to Andy to do what he needs to do, so that the people who said, you know, I'm going to commit to 1 hour, will at least, you know, be able to finish off this time with us. And then I'll have the panelists stay on, and then we'll go for another 15, maybe maximum 20 minutes. If all of us can agree to that. Andy, I'll pass it back to you for just a moment.
All right, thank you, Pastor Kenneth. I'm just gonna try and take just 5 minutes so that we can just complete this part and hand the time back to our panelists. So far so good, very very good in fact. So of course, we want to say a big thanks to Pastor Kenneth Chin, Dr. Ng Yim Peng, and YB Michelle Ng for the session just now, which will be continued in a while. And we hope that all of you who have been watching have not just been informed, but also inspired to do something, to be a help, and for you yourself to have found hope, or able to find hope, and also to be able to be a blessing to those around you who may need help and hope in these trying times. And for those of you who have asked questions that we did not and will not be able to answer today, thank you for asking those questions. We are going to try and see if we can maybe organize another session on another day to address any questions that we've not been able to address, or if not through a talk show, maybe we'll find another platform to answer those questions. So please stay tuned and just keep updated on when we will have this again. All right. And I guess we have come now to a time to announce our winners for the brief giveaway, and to share with you what you might have won and who our sponsors are. So first up, we have our first sponsor, Revo Store. Thank you so much, Revo Store, for sponsoring. Revo Store is a resource center with a mission to fuel the revolution movement, which is the movement of love through creative ways. Most of their products have a story, and if they could speak, if the products could speak, you were able to hear true stories of transformation and change lives. So they are sponsoring a complete set of an inspiration book of quotes titled Chinspiration, worth 98 ringgit, to inspire your mind and your heart. And the winner for this prize today is big congratulations to Ng Wan Chin or Chai Ling. You have won a complete set of Chinspiration Volume 1, 2, and 3 worth 98 ringgit from Revo Store. We also want to say a big thank you to Joshy Josh, our second sponsor, a catering company founded in Petaling Jaya, Malaysia, that strives to bring the freshest foods that reflect the best of the season. And with the current situation, they have started food delivery services via online platforms such as their own Joshy Josh website, Grab Food, AirAsia Food, and Smart Bite, providing fresh and delicious food at your doorstep. And they are sponsoring the authentic Musang King Durian Mousse Cake worth 98 ringgit to fill you up and to bring joy to your tummy. And so a big congratulations to our winner today, Sean Saw Chen Xiang. You have won yourself one authentic Musang King Durian Mousse Cake worth 120 ringgit from Joshy Josh. Congratulations. And finally, a big thank you to Bespoke Health, our third sponsor today. Bespoke Health is a compounding pharmacy established in 2019 in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia as a digital business. They comprise of a team of pharmacists, doctors, and biomedical engineers focusing on customized medications made in their own laboratory. Bespoke Health believes in providing top quality, optimal, targeted nutrition at affordable pricing. And they are sponsoring a sleep consultation worth 188 ringgit, where their team of consultants will customize a sleep management plan for you, taking into account your age, gender, lifestyle, genetics, environment, and medical condition, so that you can sleep well and live well. So, a big congratulations to our winner, Chan Ka Sing. You are our blessed winner for this sleep consultation worth 188 ringgit from Bespoke Health. So, a big congratulations to all our winners, and our team will contact you to work out the details on how you can claim your prizes. And yes, and I now pass the time back to Pastor Kenneth Chin and our panelists to carry on with answering some questions that we have received. Pastor Kenneth?
Thank you, Andy. Well done. And congratulations to our three winners. I think all the gifts really does bring hope and joy. You have got quotation books that bring hope and positive words. Then you got that durian Musang King. Is it a cake? Wow, I mean, who won't be happy with that? Unless, of course, you don't like durian. But then, of course, you should be happy to give it to somebody else, and share it with your family. And then, of course, you've got this sleep consultation. And, sometimes lack of sleep can cause all kinds of problems. So thank you to our sponsors as well. And congratulations again to the winners. Thank you for tuning in. And let's carry on with this, what we call after show, okay? This is the first time we're doing it. And I'm so glad that our distinguished panelists have agreed to spend another 15 minutes, 20 minutes with us. And so let's get on with the second question. If we can't help the person affected or the person already had help, how do we socialize with them, especially friends with schizophrenia? Wow, this is quite a specific question. Dr. Ng, would you like to try this first?
Okay. I think I wouldn't say socialize with them any differently as I would have in the first place. I think at the end of the day, for me, for example, if you're talking about schizophrenia, it is an illness. And just like our other friends with any physical illnesses, I wouldn't treat them any differently in terms of, approaching them, talking to them, and seeing them as a human being, seeing them for who they are. I guess the one thing I would say is, for example, if a person, if they're still symptomatic, right, and if they were to say some things that we don't quite understand, I think what would be helpful is to be mindful of our own responses.
Right.
don't we don't have to necessarily respond in a very dramatic manner, like raise our eyebrows and react otherwise. I think if we don't understand, we can clarify, and if we at that point of time we can see that it is part of perhaps the symptoms. So similar to if someone were to be having a speech impediment, or someone were to be having tics, all right, as a physical illness, or in terms of changes in of their motor or their physical or weaknesses in any part of their area as part of physical illness. I think I would learn to take that into account and not be too distracted by those things. I think they see them as who they need to be, who they are, rather than what they have. Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about friendship, right? You're already friends with them. So there's definitely a heightened sensitivity on the other party. They are probably also watching for how you would treat them. Isn't it true? And if you treat them differently, or how does it work? I would think that if you did anything or said anything, or that would be different. Because I mean, if we talk about strangers, it's a different thing. But friends are looking for just to be treated normal, right? Isn't that true?
Yeah, I mean, it's about empathy. If you were facing the same thing, how would you empathize with someone?
Right.
It's not the same as sympathizing.
Yes.
We no one wants to be pitied
Yeah.
in that sense, and no one likes to be seen as kind of needing help, and they're not kind of an equivalent.
Right.
Yeah. So empathy is, I think, it's a key thing.
Sure. YB, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Dr. Ng answered it very well. In fact, that is something that we learn in the course that we do. I think, as humans, as friends, sometimes when we see someone going through a very difficult time, it's very natural for us to want to solve their problem.
Yeah.
And I think that this is where that question is coming from. But yet at the same time, I know that we can feel very helpless when we can't do much. But I think that is a reality that we need to be able to deal with, to know where our limitations are, because we don't want to exacerbate what they're already facing. And so I think being comfortable with that reality is something we have to deal with. Certainly something I have to deal with as well as a state assembly woman. So many cases coming through, and then I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a professional, I don't know how to deal with this. So I understand that helplessness. But when I learn how I can help them, then I feel empowered. And it's actually very simple. It's exactly what Dr. Ng said. Don't treat them any different. And in fact, if you don't know how to react, a tool that we were given, listening tool that we were given, is just use and oh. Well, you don't say much. Don't try to solve their problem. Don't try to say that you know what they're facing, because we don't. Their reality is different from ours. But just be there and listen, because that's what you can do, and that's perhaps what they need from you at that time.
That's good. Just be affirmative, positive.
Sometimes I actually say that, sometimes when it's difficult and helpless, I actually say that, I'm really sorry. I just, at this point of time, I have no words. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say that's going to make this better for you at that point of time, and at the same time, I'm here.
Right.
Yeah.
Being honest, right? That's what friendships are about. Honesty and just being open, and yet saying, I'm here. Yeah, that's so good. YB, Michelle, you want to attempt first the third question? During this pandemic, how can people cope better with their mental health?
Yeah. There was a point referred to by Dr. Ng earlier in the talk, which was compartmentalizing. I think as best possible, because so many parts of our lives are collapsing within our homes. We need to be able to learn how to do that so that we'll be able to better cope. And I think that means we have to increase our level of communication with our family members that we are living with. So, having a space that you work with, and then communicating with that family member saying, look, like for example, today we have a talk at 11. So I told my husband before this, I'm going to use the space at 11. All right. So he will be able to work out his schedule on his end to use another room and then do the necessary work that he needs to do. So he gives me that space, I give him that space.
Right.
That's not something we naturally had to do before. And understandably, it can be very foreign to us and it feels really weird. But that is a way that we can try to, employ in this new way of living. Yeah, that's something I find helpful.
Yeah. Some years ago when I was interviewing some people, including the police, on just the suicide stats, and they were telling me that more male compared to female victims, the police the female police officer that I was interviewing, she said, men don't talk. And that was then, right? You're talking about 3-4 years ago. Men don't talk, so they keep it all to themselves, and that's probably why the stats was high. This is the police, okay, telling me what they think it was, and I guess it is the power of communication. By Michelle, I think that's what you're saying, and some things are not natural because we didn't have to do it 2 years back, but now we have to learn to talk and learn to get the frustration out and learn to plan. Learn to say things that we wouldn't have naturally said before, but now we have to because there's just too many things we're dealing with, and we just can't cope, right? Or at least can't cope well if we are just having it all inside boiling. There's definitely going to be an outlet somewhere, and sometimes that outlet is not the right outlet, So thank you for that, Dr. Ng.
In line with what YB Michelle is saying, I think the one important thing in communication is to try to clarify and not to assume. I think the assumption is what leads to a lot of miscommunications and a lot of conflicts sometimes. And often what we assume may not be actually what is intended. So I guess good to remember that different people have different ways of communicating. It might not necessarily fit our style of communication. That's one thing. And I think the other things I would say that's helpful during the pandemic is to actually, stick to looking after basic things. It's because we're all at home, right? So, it's very, very tempting actually to stay past our sleep bedtime, because the next day we don't have to wake up in the morning so early. We don't have to go through the traffic and etc. etc. So we might actually, and we're on, like online like this, we can lose track of time. So I think being mindful that we get adequate rest, even though I would say that that's always going to be work. So snatching on actually just putting into your schedule that 15 minutes or that 20 minutes that you're going to take this time just to breathe. Okay, take this time just to breathe. And just just to get in touch and look around, look outside and things like that. Just to rest is important, because 15 minutes can be easily withered away actually. So that is actually very, very important for us to take that break. So sleep, adequate sleep, rest, eat properly, eat balanced diet. Doesn't have to be luxurious diet, but eat properly. And I think the one key thing is to learn how to adapt, because a lot of us are used to walking outside, going out to run. I suppose now that in some places they are more relaxed, we can actually go out to run, provided that we adhere to our physical distancing and keep safe and all that. However, for those who don't have the luxury, I would say that be a little bit inventive, I guess, or innovative in how you actually do exercise at home. There are different ways of doing it. So long as some physical exercise that's there, it is helpful in making keeping ourselves healthy. And the final thing is, I think we need to keep to routines. So certain routines, certain break. I think that's important, because otherwise, everything will start collapsing on us.
Yeah. It sounds like time management is really, really key. And also self-management, isn't it? Self-care, being disciplined to do that, because you're right. Now, almost all schedules are turned topsy-turvy. There seems to be no start time, no end time, and there's just prolonged time and rubber time, and people work at any time they want to, work in their pajamas, etc., etc. But yeah, I think more than ever before, time management and self-care is so important. We have time, talking about time, only time for one more question, and I think it's a good question to end with. The question is, well, we can all be good listeners, and I think if there's one takeaway from this talk show we have had this morning, one takeaway is that we can all help, even ourselves, and help other people by just being good listeners. Just being there for your friend, your family member, and listen. Even if you don't have anything to say, can't say anything yet, be honest about it and just listen, and be positive and be affirmative. But then there will come a time when a person that we care about actually does need professional help. When is that time? When should I? The question is, when should I be referring the person to, not just referring, probably also encouraging, whatever, to get professional help? And maybe I'll add to that question: where can we get that professional help? And where do we start looking? Why Michelle?
Yeah. When someone needs professional help, so there is pre-illness and the illness itself. Even pre-illness, there is already help that you can get in the form of therapy and counseling. So I would encourage you to not wait until a time where it has already developed into an illness for you to only then consider that, okay, I need to see someone. It's fine to, and I think this is something we have to normalize, it's fine to get counseling. It's fine to get therapy. In fact,
Right.
I would tell you that, on a weekly basis, I do speak to my pastor about how I felt in a week, what is it that I had difficulty facing, and that is also a level of conscious a therapy, conscious counseling that I get, just so that I'll be able to better cope with the many challenges that we face. So let's do that. Let's start thinking about, before it even becomes an illness, what do I need to do in order to be able to better cope with life? And all of us need that.
That's good.
If it has come to a stage where that person has some level of illness, and usually the indicators would be they're not sleeping well, they're not eating well, prolonged level of sadness for usually about 2 weeks, then you probably have to start thinking about talking to them and offering support for you to journey with them in this journey of seeking help together. So and that's for depression. And if there's anxiety, you notice that this person gets agitated, worked up really fast, and they are just not who they are anymore. Even then, also, a change in behavior again, direct or indirect behavioral cues, direct or indirect verbal cues. Those are the things that we look out for. It can even be as small as, if someone is going to give up on life, it can even be as small as setting their affairs in order. For example, giving away something that they really like. That is a behavioral cue that should send alarm bells in your head. Or if they have said things like, "Oh, I just feel so tired with life." That is again, an alarm that should set off in your head. Then you should start talking to them about, hey, usually when someone is in this situation, they might need to seek help. Is this something that we should explore together? And if they do say yes, then let's start talking about the different options that are available. So if you were to see that there are different options, there's psychologists, there's clinical psychologists, and there's also psychiatrists. It's very difficult to tell you, especially for a lay person like you and me, who you should see first. Usually what I would tell them to do is to see a psychologist first, and then the psychologist would be able to assess whether they need to see a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist. But the rule of thumb also is, even within that system itself, they already have their own referral. So if you go see a psychiatrist and that is the closest available to you, if the psychiatrist feels that you need to see a psychologist, they will refer you to one.
Right.
So don't be too daunted by the system. Go to a hospital, tell them the challenges that you're facing, say that you want to seek mental health support, go to whoever that they tell you to go to, and then within that system itself, you will be able to find your feet. Yeah, so I won't be too worried about it. Just go to a hospital to seek help.
That's good. Michelle, I keep hearing you use the word together, and I like that because it's not always so obvious to us. It's like, okay, here's the number to call, or I have a friend, you just go and see him. But together has been a word that you constantly have been using throughout the hour.
Yeah.
And I actually think if we can do it more together, let the person know that he or she is not alone, which is what Dr. Ng started with. She started the whole interview saying, I just want to talk to the viewers that you are not alone. And I just want to say, just in case it was not obvious to our viewers, that is really a key word.
Yeah, Pastor Kenneth, I just want to just illustrate what together really means, and I think you have pointed out a few examples of how we kind of we help in the best way we can, but sometimes in that situation they need more than that. So I've personally handled a case, and this person lives really, really far, but I felt that was necessary to go that extra mile because of the way they have also supported me in the work that I do. And this person called up to say, look, Michelle, I'm standing at the a ledge of life and I really don't know what to do. I just wanted to call you to let you know. And I took that seriously and I said, where are you? And I went there. It was the middle of the night and it was very far away, but we went anyway. And we sat for 2 hours. So by that time, it was already 2 o'clock in the morning, just talking and saying, hey, look, you're facing a lot of stress now. Let's go get help together. By the time we reached the hospital, it was 2:30. By the time they saw us, it was 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. He or she got the medication that he or she needed. He or she is with us until today and is coping very well, doing very well at work.
Wonderful.
But that's what I mean by really going at it together,
Yes.
holding their hands and being with them until they get the necessary help and are able to stand on their feet again. That is why they've trusted us in the first place, and I think we really, really need to honor that trust when they do.
Got it. So good. Dr. Ng?
I think YB Michelle has said it very, very well. I think the one thing I may add to that is essentially just saying that, well, when do you know you should be referring to professional help? Number one, if you see any aspect of their functioning is not okay. So in terms of socially, are they already really isolating, withdrawing themselves? Physiologically, they're not sleeping, they're not eating, they're not concentrating, and occupationally or academically, they're not functioning where they are. I think that one also has to be tempered with what supports they have at that point of time. If you think that this person is already not having supports, you don't have to wait until that point. You may have to refer earlier. And also, I guess more importantly, if the person who is in distress is also, a parent or where they have their own dependents, I think that is more urgent for them to be seen earlier by a professional, because them being unwell, it also affects their dependents. So those are important things. I think if someone is already having very psychotic symptoms, for example, they're hearing voices, they're seeing, smelling, hearing, whatever things that other people don't experience, but they do. In those cases, they probably need to be seen by a psychiatrist, because that is where the level of severity requires medication. I like that YB Michelle has talked about what actually together means, and I think at the same time also I think for because sometimes what happens that might actually frighten some people, because I don't have that capacity to go all the way so that might frighten someone. So I would say, to add on to, not to go against, but to actually add on to what YB Michelle has said is, what Kai Xuan, I think YB Michelle has mentioned, a good friend of mine, has actually said before, in terms of offering help, you can offer 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. Your 5-star is what YB Michelle has talked about. Your 3-star is actually to just mention these are whatever it is. Your 4-star is to actually go ahead and say these are your resources, and who, when you go there, and who do you know, and then kind of describe the place so the person doesn't feel too blur, that kind of thing. So I guess if we can't go, like, we can't do what YB Michelle has done, all really, really 5-star plus all the way there, right? What we can do is to make sure that the person, we take them to someone that they can also feel safe with, so they're not alone to go and deal with all these things. So we have that link, that pathway that is there. And finally, I'm going to leave you with what I have a mnemonic to recognize warning signs of suicide. So the mnemonic is adapted from the American Psychiatric Association. It's called mishap waits. So MISHAPWAITS. So M for if there's any drastic mood change, I for suicidal ideation, whether it's communicated or written, S for substance use, H there's hopelessness, A if there's any agitation, restlessness, anxiety, P if they start seeing the pointlessness of life, then wait, W for withdrawal, A for anger, lots of bitterness, I for impulsivity, T for feeling very trapped, and finally S if they start saying goodbye, as what YB Michelle has said, or starting to make final preparations. So in that sense, it's a kind of mnemonic to keep in mind. If you come across anything like that, then those may be warning signs of suicide. Yeah.
Right. Wow, we wish we had more time, but already I've taken so much of your time, Dr. Ng Yim Ping and YB Michelle Ng. I can't thank you enough, really, to have invested your time on this show with us today. You have given invaluable, not just advice, but also your story, your own very personal story. That really has gone a long way, and thank you. It is just our hope, our real hope, that everyone who have tuned in today have found some, hope, some encouragement, some pointers, not only to help themselves but their loved ones and their friends. So that's really, really our desire for Breathe Online Talk Show today, is that all of us, because of this 1.5 hours, will be able to breathe a little bit easier and live longer, but not just in terms of quantity of time, but quality of time and quality of life. So thank you again to our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much, really. And to all you viewers out there, thank you so much for spending your time with us. And I pray that you have been encouraged and blessed, and that you will pass on some of this knowledge, but more than just knowledge, pass on, that you will be that someone who can walk together, that's the word, with someone else. Even if you have not much to say, just be a friend, be there, so that no one needs to be alone. Thank you again, and to everyone behind the scenes, to my team that has been helping to put this together. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend. God bless you.
when we talk about mental health, I think the first word that comes in the mind is gila, cheesing, crazy.
There's always just a breaking point, I would say. So a lot of things fell apart at the same time.
And so that stigma is still very real in our community. Of course, some people then take the shortcut.
A teenage girl was found dead on the pavement of her family's rented unit in Batu Kawa about 8 p.m. on Monday. Before killing herself, had created an Instagram poll which asked her friends to vote whether she should live or die. Unfortunately, only 31% of them voted live on her Instagram, while an overwhelming 69% voted death.
It could be that people were unaware or people were ignorant on the severity of the issue. So actually majority voted for her to die. And because of that, she sadly took her life. And since then, actually there has been a clusters of more and more suicide cases in Kuching, in Sarawak.
Even when you talk about suicide, or even if you talk about mental illness, people will be like, huh? Got people kill themselves one man? They will still be in that bubble wondering, oh, people get sick? Oh, are they crazy?
From where we were, I'm sure we've gone in a very positive direction. However, when it comes to these things, there's so much to do.
Kalau anda mempunyai masalah emosi seperti ini, cari bantuan because ada bantuan.
There are people who will care and support you. Even if it could be the most unlikeliest person that you could think of. Sometimes life might not seem very worth living, but I think dying is even less worth doing.
When we talk about mental health, I think the first word that comes in the mind is gila, cheesing, crazy.
There's always just a breaking point, I would say. So a lot of things fell apart at the same time.
And so that stigma is still very real in our community. Of course, some people then take the shortcut.
A teenage girl was found dead on the pavement of her family's rented unit in Batu Kawa about 8 p.m. on Monday. Before killing herself, had created an Instagram poll which asked her friends to vote whether she should live or die. Unfortunately, only 31% of them voted live on her Instagram, while an overwhelming 69% voted death.
It could be that people were unaware or people were ignorant on the severity of the issue. So actually majority voted for her to die. And because of that, she sadly took her life. And since then, actually there has been a clusters of more and more suicide cases in Kuching, in Sarawak.
Even when you talk about suicide, or even if you talk about mental illness, people will be like, huh? Got people kill themselves one meh? They will still be in that bubble wondering, oh, people get sick? Oh, are they crazy?
From where we were, I'm sure we've gone in a very positive direction. However, when it comes to these things, there's so much to do.
Kalau anda mempunyai masalah emosi seperti ini, cari bantuan because ada bantuan.
There are people who will care and support you. Even if it could be the most unlikeliest person that you could think of. Sometimes life might not seem very worth living, but I think dying is even less worth doing.